And Joe Doucette from NDOW, he can give us a nice little presentation here. So.
All right. Well, originally I was supposed to come down to Las Vegas for your club meeting. Obviously, things have changed. I appreciate you inviting me to do it this way, though. Hopefully, you can. And Randy Upton says he has no microphone. So hopefully, we can get it across. What I'll be doing is a PowerPoint. I believe I did this one at the club a few years back. But I freshened it up a bit. Talked a little bit about. I'll talk a little bit more about what current conditions are like up here. It's all generalities. I just want people to realize that we're not promoting you to go traveling all around the state to do stuff. We're here to so that things do open up, you'll have some information about maybe getting out there and going to do stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you guys. And so what we have here, again, thank you for attending this NDOW Conservation Education Program. We know that you're all supporters of wildlife in the outdoors. However, we want to advise at this time that you do stay at home. And due to the COVID-19 pandemic, under the recommendation of the CDC and our state's health department, please stay home for Nevada. So with that being said, there we go. So we're going to talk about fly fishing in northeastern Nevada. This is a nice little brown trout that was caught a few years back out of South Fork Reservoir. What we're going to cover today, or this evening, on a couple of topics. We're first going to talk about the high mountain lakes. And we'll go, and those are mostly what we're talking about are in the Ruby Mountains in the East Humboldt Range, just outside of Elko. We're also going to talk about some of our high desert reservoirs up here. I'm not going to cover all of them because there are so many, but for those who don't know, South Fork Reservoir, for example, back in the 2005-2006 era, was ranked as one of the top 10 still waters in the western United States by Denny Rickards, who's an author. Has written a number of stillwater fishing books, as well as writes for the Fly Fishing and Tying Journal. And then we're going to cover some small rivers and streams. For those who don't know, we also have in the eastern region, which covers Elko, Eureka, Lander, and White Pine County. We have over 1,200 miles of fishable streams up here. So our high mountain lake management in eastern Nevada, we've got mountain ranges that go up to 11,000. The Ruby Mountains go up to 11,400 feet. We've got 25 named alpine lakes in the area, 19 in the Rubies and 6 in the East Humboldt Range. And there are 22 of those, though not all of them have fish now, but 22 of those lakes have records of being stocked at some time between 1895 and today. What you're looking at here is Verdi. It's one of the higher elevation lakes. It sits, believe it or not, above 10,000 feet, and actually has some of the better, larger cutthroat trout that are stocked. And the reason that they're a little bit larger in this lake than some of the others is access to the lake is very limited. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we get through this. Currently, there's 11 established self-sustaining population in 11 lakes. These are all brook trout. As a general rule, they don't get very large. Normally what happens in a lot of these brook trout waters, they get a little bit overpopulated. At these higher elevations, there's less food in them. And so as a general rule, your average size brookie is going to be between 7 and 10 inches at these lakes. We have 8 established populations with periodic augmentation. And of those 8, there's really only 6 that we really regularly stock. The other 2, every once in a while, we'll throw something in if there's a winter kill. And then we have 6 lakes that are considered unsuitable for trout survival. They're just too shallow. They freeze all the way to the bottom. It's kind of funny, if you hike up to Lamoille Lake, which is a short little hike out of Lamoille Canyon to go fishing, you'll often see people stopped at Dollar Lakes, which are very shallow, and fishing, and you hate to tell them, but otherwise they're wasting their time, that they need to go another 3/4 of a mile to a mile up to a lake that actually holds fish. So, and I think you can see my mouse moving around the screen, I hope. So we have, these are lakes through here. As you can see, they range from Sites Lake at about 8,900 feet, just under 9,000, all the way up to Verdi, which is 10,100 feet. There's a, got got carried away there. They range in size from less than 2 acres, and then the largest is up about 18 acres. And so, or actually 29 acres. Echo Lake is 29 acres. And so they range in those, they're quite small. Most of them are fairly shallow, ranging anywhere from really shallow, like Dollar Lakes, which doesn't hold fish. However, some of them, such as Fav, Echo, Liberty, are upwards of 100 feet deep. And especially in Liberty and in Echo Lake, we have stocked lake trout, and there are still and that we haven't stocked them since the 80s. So there's some natural reproduction going on because occasionally people still do catch a lake trout out of those two lakes. All the ones that have natural reproduction, and this is just the Ruby Mountains. These are not the East Humboldts. All of the natural reproduction is basically brook trout. If you look at the cutthroat waters, they do not have much natural reproduction other than Verdi Lake. They think there is some. They've found more than one age class in there after they've stocked. So there is a little bit of natural reproduction going in there. As you can see, the cutthroat waters in the East Humboldt, in the Ruby Mountains, you've got Griswold Lake, Hidden Lake, you've got Lost Lake, and then Verdi. And then the other one, Griswold. Griswold has access that is from a private entrance, but because they put in a shooting range and used Endow Pittman Robertson money for the shooting range, they have to allow access to the shooting range. So I think they're allowing access now if you go to the main office and ask to get in there. But the lake can be, or the trail can be really overgrown. My favorite one to fish of all these is Hidden Lakes. It's about 9,400 feet. And it's absolutely beautiful. It's got a great camp spot, and it's got really nice LP in it. So our 11 self-sustaining brook trout populations are managed as wild fisheries, i.e. we don't stock them. We haven't stocked brook trout in a number of years now, and that's by design. And then, of course, our 6 augmented populations are managed as unique quality fisheries. Those are our cutthroat waters. In general, the 6 augmented lakes are aerially stocked every 3 to 5 years. Cutthroat planters are hatchery stocked. They are pyramid strain, but they're not the Eastern Nevada Lahontan cutthroat trout strain. They're from the Western Nevada. That stocking of 3 to 5 years is what they shoot for, due to some cost issues. The purchase of a new helicopter, which is a lot more expensive to operate than our old one was. And then not being able to get the fish they wanted at the time they needed to. Our high mountain lakes that are augmented, those 6 lakes have not been stocked in about 7 years now. And so fish in our lakes, there are not as many cutthroat in those lakes, but when you do catch them, you are catching them upwards of 15, 16, 17 inches, which for our high mountain lakes are really quite large. I was up at Hidden 4 years ago fishing, and they hadn't, it hasn't been stocked since then. Back then, I was catching them between 14 and 16 inches. A friend of mine who sub-guides for Hidden Lake Outfitters that takes people up there, they've been catching them upwards of 17. They even had a couple last year. They say were 18. I don't know if they actually measured them, but that is what it is. We can talk about a little bit about the actual angler use now. So to give you an idea, the one of the shortest hikes in is going to be Lamoille Lake. It's about a 2-mile hike in. One of the longer ones is going to be Overland Lake, Echo Lake, Fav, and Hidden Lakes. They're upwards of 5 to 6.5 miles, and so and the thing to remember, you're at elevation here. Realize when we looked at those elevations, the lowest elevation lake was 8,900 feet. So if you're coming from Vegas, when you do come, say late summer when things cool down a bit and we can get out, you should plan on spending a couple of days acclimating. I have seen people come in and head up. I've even seen people up at like Hidden Lake, where I like to fish, who live in Elko, actually have altitude sickness because they hiked in too fast. They didn't drink enough water. The big thing to remember at altitude, the air is really thin. So, slow down. The effect of the sun is very much improved. You don't have near as much atmosphere so make sure you're putting on lots of sunblock. And then of course, you need to drink lots and lots of water. As we all know, especially you folks down in Southern Nevada, we are very, very dry. And angler use really changes around. And these are just from 1 year, just to give you kind of an idea. I will say this is from a couple of years ago, so that I would suspect that angler use has increased as the population of the Elko Spring Creek area has increased, and as our state population has increased, along with the fact that word is starting to get out about our fishing up here. The one that gets the most use of the Ruby Mountain Lakes is Lamoille Lake. It's the shortest hike, obviously. Island and Liberty Lakes are two close seconds behind, but they only get half the anglers that Lamoille does. I would say that you can get past Lamoille Lake into some of those others, like Liberty or Fav, Echo. Though, if you can get up to those lakes, your fishing improves dramatically. It really does. And so, on average, on the average person spends 2 days per angler up there fishing. So, on average, there's 2 days up there fishing, and they are averaging 12 fish per angler. Realize you're including in that people like my granddaughters who have never fished before, and then you've got people like many of your fly fishing members of your club who probably fish quite a bit. Overland Lake, if you look at that one right down in this area here, you'll notice it's Overland and Robinson put out the most fish. Even with, granted, you have more anglers here, but look at the number per angler there, quite a bit difference. And a lot of that has to do with all the brook trout in those lakes. What's really cool about Robinson down here, for whatever reason, the last 2 summers, the fish have gotten larger. I'm not sure why, but it was not uncommon to get a 12 or 13 inch brook trout out of Robinson last year. I was actually shocked. I talked to again my buddy. That's where they're Hidden Lake Outfitters. Robinson is about 1.5 miles from Hidden Lake, and so people they have their camp set up at Hidden. They go up to Hidden to catch the cutthroat, but if the cutthroat are being real picky and not cooperating, it's only about a 45-hour hike down to Robinson. People go down there, they'll fish for the day, and then come back up. And I talked to guys that were going down there and bringing brookies up for their dinner and their breakfast the next morning, and they were bringing anywhere from 10 to 14-inch brookies, which is really a nice sized brookie for northern Nevada. So you got lots of brookies there. Overland's a bit of a hump into it. It's a little bit of it's a pretty, and I will say that at Overland Lake, the fish are stunted. A big fish there is 8 inches. I'm going to say your average fish that you catch out of brookie, you catch out of Overland, is going to be about 6 inches. And so again, the brook trout tend to be smaller fish. Obviously, the cutthroats get a little bit bigger, but they're all have beautiful views. The hikes in are gorgeous. Just take your time. Don't overdo it. What's going on here? There we go. So the East Humboldt don't have near as many lakes. You've got Angel Lake, which is, notice that 0.0 miles in. It's one of the highest lakes in the United States that you can get to by a blacktop road. It's at an elevation of about 8,400 feet, blacktop all the way to the dam. It's a beautiful lake that you're looking at it right there. No, actually, that's not Angel Lake. Excuse me. And Endow treats it as a put and take fishery. The average angler spends about 3 days a year there. The average fish per angler is about 10. I take my introductory level fly fishing classes up there. We put them on float tubes, and it's not uncommon for somebody who's never fly fished before to catch 8 to 10, 12 fish in a morning of fishing. I even had some guy whose kids wanted to fly fish. He was a diehard worm dunker, but he went along because they were too young to go by themselves. and proclaimed it was the best day of fly or fishing he'd ever had. I think between the three of them, they caught about 20, 25 fish. So they had a blast. Gray's Lake, just something to let you guys know down here. Gray's Lake, it is a lake on a private inholding inside of the national forest. It's on private property. Lately, the owner has been patrolling it and telling everybody they can't fish it. The Forest Service is not promoting it. They've actually taken the sign to the lake down. It is a hump in if you come in from the lake. You go through two drainages. Each one has about a 1,500 foot elevation up and down, and so lots of switchbacks. If you come in from the Star Valley side through Smiley's Ranch, you have to get permission. It's much shorter. Not shorter. It's about the same distance, but it's steady. It's not a lot of up and down. It's pretty much steady all the way up. So it's a little bit better. Smith Lake, which is only 1.5 miles out of Angel, it's amazing. You can go to Angel Lake. The parking lot will be full. You'll see 40, 50 people around the lake fishing. That 45-minute hour hike into Smith Lake, and you have the lake to yourself. It's got cutthroats, and it's actually one lake where we have documented natural reproduction of cutthroat. There's a little bit of a stream in the back with some gravel in it, and so they've gotten some of that. Bird Eye and Winchell Lakes don't hold any fish. As far as all of our high mountain lakes go, you can see that the Ruby Mountains, and this is a combination, I believe, of the rubies and actually this is just the rubies. It's 836 anglers in the average year. They spend about 1,500 days fishing, catch about 10,000 fish, about 12 fish per angler. You can see then the bottom right down here, this is up at Liberty Lake, and that is a lake trout. But as you can see, it's got a big head, pretty skinny body. One of my daughter's friends was up there fishing, I want to say it was 2015 or 16, and he said it was 14 pounds, but another guy I know that was up there said it was closer to 10 pounds. But even so, a 10 fish at 9,800 feet of elevation on a fly rod is just a hoot. So, and of course, that the one lake you're looking at with the guy on the left, Alan Genet, that's Overland. No, that's not Overland. Maybe that is Overland because that's a big fish for Overland. But it looks like Overland with the rocks in the back. This is Angel Lake here. Beautiful view. In fact, the guy you see fishing in the bottom of the picture is the Ruby Mountain Fly Fishers Club president. And the way you fish these high mountain lakes is pretty easy. You can nymph them, which is what a lot of people will do under an indicator. You can strip with really small buggers. I like little black crystal buggers. Or if you know what a slump buster is, I like a slump buster with either a royal blue or a red braided body with black squirrel tail for your or black squirrel zonker for the tail and the collar, and a silver bead or silver cone head, and it works really, really well up here. I tie them in a size 10s and 12s, a little small, but they work really well. And then again, like I said, black crystal buggers, beadhead crystal buggers are great. Anything black or olive. Dry flies, my go-to at the high mountain lakes would be to put a very small hopper, yellow stimulator, or elk hair caddis on. And then I run a dropper between 3 and 4 feet below. Generally, I'm using either an olive or a peacock herl soft hackle fly. Tie those in about 12s, 14s, and 16s. And then I really like that when there's a light chop on the water. I've actually had a couple times, if you look back here, you see a big rock face, and there's a ledge underneath the water, and you can catch a lot of tigers right back in here. They like to get underneath that ledge. I'll actually bounce the flies off the rock wall, so they drop straight down within a foot or two of the ledge. And I've actually had a couple doubles back there where I've had a fish on both the dry fly and the dropper. And that's not uncommon at these high mountain lakes that have brook trout. Cutthroats, on the other hand, a little more finicky. If they're not hitting, I really like something dark and small, fish to either dry or in the film. Ants don't go to any high mountain lake without ants. You got to have them. Griffiths gnats work real well. I also like a black Adams, parachute Adams. I like the parachute so I can see. When you get these small dark flies, they're kind of hard to see. But like or even a black, what they call a black gnat with a parachute post. These small, we're talking 14s, 16s, even down to 18s. Fish them either dry, or if you don't see bubbles when the fish surface, you're just seeing a dimple. It normally means they're not coming out of the water to take the fish. They're sipping just underneath. And then what I'll do is I won't put dry fly floatant on my fly, but I'll grease my monofilament leader so the leader doesn't sink, and that fly just dips down into about the top 2 or 3 inches, and that'll often be the difference between getting a fish or not. And of course, at these high mountain lakes, lots of great stuff. You've got bighorn sheep, you've got Rocky Mountain goats, you've got Himalayan snowcock. In fact, up at Hidden Lakes, when I took my wife and daughter up there in 2016 on horses, about 3 in the morning, my daughter had her little tent. She was, when I say daughter, she's in her 30s now. She was in her late 20s then, but she had her own little tent off to the side. In the middle of the night, comes in, Dad, there's a mountain lion out there. I get out with my flashlight. It was a mountain goat walking right through the middle of camp. She just heard the noise and automatically assumed the worst. And then one morning, because my wife and daughter like to sleep in, and I was up at the crack of dawn eating, the Himalayan snowcock. We had 4 or 5 of them coming right on the edge of camp, probably no more than 30 feet away from me, so I got to see those. So it's pretty cool to get into places, different wildlife. We got pika up at the higher elevations. It's not uncommon to see pika, which is the smallest member of the rabbit family. We'll move on to high desert lakes. This is South Fork Reservoir. I had a little more brown in my mustache back then than I do now. But that's a very common sized fish in South Fork Reservoir. Well, we'll start with wild horse. North on this picture is actually up in the upper left-hand corner. This is north orientation. South down here, north up here. This is Hendrick's Arm right here. This is Penrod. These are the 2 areas that get the most use. A little bit older picture. This picture is from 2011. So this was at the beginning of the drought. Water levels are pretty similar now to what is here, actually a little bit higher. Right now, the water's actually going way up into here and clear up into here. And this island doesn't have this little part over here up anymore. State Park Campground is here. There is a culvert that goes underneath the highway right here. And especially in the spring, there's a flow coming out, and that flow brings food, and fish stack up in here waiting for the food. This area right in here can be really good for wipers, which is a cross between a white bass and a striped bass. Because the trout move in and out of here, and the perch move in and out of here, and they are feeding on the trout and the perch in this area here. There's a Warm Springs down here towards the bottom of the screen, and that can be very productive, where the warm water hits the cold water, and it's really, really a lot of fun. And then down here by the old road bed, I've done really well fishing down here by the old road bed when the water's up this high. Last summer, we were letting the wind drift our boat down through here, and then we'd troll back up and then drift back down again. And I bet that morning I caught about 20 trout between 16 and 23 inches, and I caught almost 40 perch. I did keep some perch. I was using actually a shooting head. I was using my Pyramid Lake setup. I had a shooting head, and my running line actually was a sinking running line, not a floating one. You have to have a stripping basket if you're using something like that. But I was ticking the bottom at 15, 16 feet, and that's where I was picking up the perch. Going into the wind when we were trolling, I had my fly up higher, taking trout, and on the drift back down, we were picking up perch. A lot of fun. I kept about 10 perch. The perch have really come back now. I kept about 10 of those 40 that were all over 10 inches. One of them was even pushing 12 to 12 and a half, almost 13 inches. This is a big woolly bugger lake. If anybody's ever fished Pyramid and you know about balanced leeches, the locals have really turned on to balanced leeches up here. Bruised, black and bruised is a very popular color, and olive, and then of course the wine colors or purples are working pretty good. So this there is the state park campground is here. This is all Native American land outside around it. For the most part, they own all the private around it. So you can stay in the state park. It's got flush toilets, heated showers. Andrew Bass is the state park ranger, does a great job. If you go onto the tribal land to camp, it's a little bit cheaper, but you don't have the amenities. There's an unimproved boat launch here. And then of course the state park has a very nice improved boat launch right off of this point here. And it's been doing pretty good. About 2 years ago, when the lake filled up after that really big winter, was it 17, 2018, it really turned the lake on. That lake has produced some very nice fish. Look at these. These are very typical fish there right now. 18, 19 inches. The top one's a bow cut. The bottom one's a rainbow. And you can kind of, one of the ways to tell the difference is the spotting. And that's a very common. This is my buddy I was fishing with last year. This was one of the smaller trout we caught that day. And of course it was a windy day. We were first thing in the morning. They also have warm water species. We talked about the perch. And of course the smallmouth bass. For a couple years there, back in the early 2000s, Wild Horse and South Fork were trading the state bass, or the smallmouth bass state record. Each one held it I think twice during that time. And so it's not uncommon to catch smallies upwards of 3 pounds. As a general rule, though, they're going to be right around a pound. That perch picture there was in the heyday. That's from like 1999, 2000. But this last year, the perch really turned back on again. So that's been good. It's a great fishery. Right now, it's closed to camping, and the tribal lands are also closed to camping. It's day use only. And again, they have wipers. Now, I will tell you that Wild Horse does not have many wipers left. It is, they put a lot of wipers in. It crashed. They were there to control the fish that compete with the trout. When the perch overran the place, trout size diminished tremendously. Went from an average of say 18, 19 inches down to an average of 13 or 14 inch trout. And because they're competing for the same food base. And so Endow biologist Chris Drake started putting wipers in. They're a blast to fish for. If you get a wiper on a fly rod, it is a whole different animal. 5-pound wiper on a fly rod fights like a 10-pound trout, 12-pound trout. But these guys are a lot of fun. During the drought, I think it was 2013, 2014, they took the limits off of all species in the lake because the lake was getting down in late summer, down between 10 and 15% of capacity. A lot of people went after the wipers. I know one bass fisherman who one summer alone took 60 of them out. They're great eating. The limit is 1. It's got to be 15 inches or larger. But so with that population way down now, that's why the perch have come back up. They're going to give it, I believe, this summer for the perch to recover, and then next summer they'll start putting wipers back in, but at a much reduced rate. Wipers, for the way they fish for wipers up there, they're open water species. They like fast-moving fish. They're very piscivorous. South Fork has, we'll talk South Fork in the next lake, but up there, chartreuse seems to be the color. They're tying basically chartreuse clousers. The only difference is instead of a tinsel body, they're actually putting a chartreuse crystal chenille body on, and that's the only real difference. Of course, channel cats are up there, and they range anywhere after we stock them. Obviously, they come in at about half a pound, 3/4 of a pound, but they're up. I think the lake record's pushing 20 pounds. South Fork Reservoir, which is closer to Elko. It is 18 miles from Elko to the end of the state park, which is about right here's where the state park starts. This is the Maine Ranger Station right there. Here's the main boat ramp. It's really fun to sit there and fish the main boat ramp, watch all these guys in these big boats get in, and they're going to head go zooming out to the open lake to catch all these fish, and we're catching 18 to 22-inch trout, just either from shore or float tube right in the back of the cove. I take it back. This is Tamara. This is the main boat ramp cove right here. On this shelf here in the spring, right about now, actually we're at the tail end of it now, there's some shelves in there that have some gravel, and the trout try to spawn on them. And there's some really big hens and males that come in there. And I've caught fish, 5-pound trout, 6 feet from shore. And so that's a real popular area. This is what we call the bluffs. If you ever read our fishing reports and they talk about the bluffs, we're talking over here. Jet Ski Beach is down here. It's the most common. It's called Jet Ski Beach because everybody puts their jet skis or their boats. You can camp right next to the water, and you can pull your boat and jet ski literally to within 20 feet of your camp. This is another boat ramp down here. And so there's generally, I take that back, it's right here. And generally there is during the summer, there's a buoy line going across here. And this south end of the lake is a no wake zone. And that's so that fishermen, because this lake is so close to town, because it is a much warmer lake than Wild Horse, gets a lot of skiing use, a lot of boating type use for pleasure craft. And so this area down here, and the lake, the original riverbed comes in about here and runs up almost the middle here, and then stays to this left-hand side and goes through here. So if you can crisscross over that old riverbed, there's still a current from here coming in, brings a lot of food, and a lot of the trout and the wipers will hang off to either side of that. This time of year, we're going into chironomids, midge larvae, and like Pyramid Lake, our midges are quite large. It's not uncommon to be using 10s and 12s. We use 10s and 12 snow cones, frostbite chironomids, chironocones. 10s and 12s are really common. Now this time of year we start off smaller, so we're using 14s. Probably about early to mid-May we'll go into 12s, and then late May we start going into 10s as the midge grow. But snow cones is probably one of my favorites to fish out here, and under an indicator. However, you're going to want to use a slip strike indicator as we move into the summer, because you often have 15, 16 feet to the bottom. And so you've got 15, 16 feet of leader and tip it out. And if you don't use that slip strike indicator, then you're not going to be able to land the fish. There's a nice big ledge right off here. And if you can get a pontoon boat or a float tube, right off here, you fish that ledge is really good. These bluffs are really good. Center of the lake, not the best, but you're fishing those edges, and that's what it is. There's actually a canal comes through here, and in the spring, especially if it's really windy, get your pontoon boat or float tube or canoe in this canal. It's very, very shallow. Some monster trout get in there in the spring, and don't know why, but you got to hit it just right. And then of course we have the river. River above South Fork produces some nice fish. This is right at the very south end of the lake. This kid caught this fish right where the river comes into the lake. This is one of our biologists when they were gill netting fish. That's a nice trout. One of our biologist's daughters, she's a fishing fool. That's a smallie out of South Fork. You can see the dam right behind her. And then of course, got some really nice trout. People from Reno come here pretty regularly, and California and Vegas to come fish it. This is a husband and wife couple. They come every year. And so South Fork is often fished much like Wild Horse. Your woolly buggers, leeches are huge, balanced leeches. The last couple of years, South Fork's actually not fished very well. Wild Horse has way outfished it. And then last fall, about October, it turned on. We didn't really have hardly any safe ice. We had about 2 weeks of safe ice, so there really wasn't much ice fishing going on, so you couldn't tell that. But then this spring, when it iced out, or it opened up probably mid to late February, to where you could put a float tube or pontoon boat on it, and it really turned on. And so they've been catching a lot of really, really nice fish out of there. Last couple of years, you were lucky to catch 1 or 2 fish a day, which is not like South Fork. Now, South Fork, the number of fish per angler hour is much lower than Wild Horse because it's a much richer water as far as food. But at the same time, it still was, 1 or 2 fish for a day's worth of fishing is no. Some of our small rivers and streams, one of them, South Fork of the Humboldt River above comes in. You can see natural reproduction there, lower right of the rainbows. And then both those fish on the left-hand side were caught coming into the river channel. Basically, you've got 2 miles of river on state park land, and then 10 miles above state lands to the diversion. Since the state purchased the park back in late 80s, early 90s, and they built the dam, the habitat's really improved. However, there's a problem with summer flows. With the rubies, even on a bad year, there should be decent flows in there. But there's times when we're getting down to 2 or 3 CFS, and so there's some water use going on that probably shouldn't be going on up above it. There's no reason it couldn't sustain 15 CFS through the summer. Here's a brown trout up above. They used to have a lot of reds. I think since we started putting Eagle Lakes in there back in the late 2007, 8, 9, when we were doing Gallagher hatchery and we were getting fish from all around the West, that's when we started to have a spawning run up the river. And I think I don't know why, but they've kind of competed with the browns. And so you don't see many browns up above anymore. You see mostly rainbows. And we have a spawning run that generally starts mid to late February, goes into about mid-April, and then we get another really smaller run up there about the very end of April, early May. It lasts only about a week to maybe 2 weeks. The other one runs about 5 or 6 weeks, and it's not uncommon to catch large fish. The only thing we ask is when you get into shallow water like this, these fish are pretty beat up from people catching and releasing, but stay out of the reds if you are going to fish it during that time of year. The lower river has really turned on in the last couple of years. Part of it is with the heavy flows that we've had coming out of the rubies, with the really big winters, and then followed by a couple of average winters. It's dumping a lot of reservoir fish down there, and so it's really got some nice fish. There's a big pool right below the dam that you're really not supposed to fish because you're not supposed to fish within a quarter mile of the dam, but people do anyway. We took our shocking barge in there last September. Actually, I can't remember, it was late September, early October. And we literally pulled out a whole ton of smallmouth, largemouth, and wipers. We left the trout in, but we warm water fish, put them back in the reservoir. We literally, after weighing and measuring them all, in 2 days of shocking, put a ton of fish back into South Fork. So there's natural recruitment of browns, rainbows, and smallmouth bass. Because of the dam requirements, even if the reservoir is a flow in, flow out reservoir, which means whatever flows in has to go out. There's no irrigation storage. It's the only impoundment in the state of Nevada strictly for recreation. And so they have, for the health of the stream below, they're required a minimum to put 5 CFS out, cubic feet per second. But it ranges from 5 CFS late summer, whereas early spring you can have as much as 1,300 CFS going through there. So you got to find that happy medium in between to fish it. Again, there's a South Fork stream fish. That's Mike Mott, president of the Ruby Mountain Fly Fishers. Another stream that's very popular up here that fishes more like a big stream is the Bruno River. And this is a shot of the Bruno here. This was a husband and wife that I went fishing with one day. There's a native population of red bands in there, as well as mountain whitefish, and then there's some suckers. My favorite stream in all of Nevada to fish. Part of it is because I know it pretty well because I fish it a lot. But the other part of it is the fact that mid to late July and August, September, when it's hopper season, I can be on there fly fishing, and on a Saturday, and I'm the only guy I see fishing, I can catch 40, 50 fish on hoppers and stimulators, beetles and ants. And the only people I see are people up on the road above who are out scouting for their deer or elk tags. There will be some fishing in the evenings when they come back to camp, but I'm really the only one fishing it almost 90% of the time, and that's on a weekend. So you can't ask for anything better than that. Again, I'm spoiled. I only live about an hour and a half drive from here. So I only fish it during the dry fly season. I get the hopper stimmies, elk hair caddis, and just go to town, have a blast. Average size fish is small. This is actually a pretty nice fish for there. Average size fish in there is going to be 9 inches. I have caught them up to 16, but that's very rare, and normally it's close to ponds. The other thing you have to realize is we've got quite a few trout that all waters, different species of native trout that all meet kind of in Elko County. And so you've got Yellowstones. Bonnevilles are a little bit south there, but you can get Bonnevilles 10 miles outside of Elko County. But they all meet in this eastern region. So you've got red bands, bull trout, LCT, Yellowstones, and Bonnevilles. And so it's pretty cool. Vince, did you have something you want to say or ask?
I'm just looking at the map.
Okay, no problem. And we'll talk a little bit more about that a little bit later on. Red bands are really cool for those who've never fished for them. Unlike the coastal rainbows, which is what most of the fisheries departments nationwide stock, they don't lose their par marks into adulthood. This is an adult fish, and they keep that beautiful dark color. Yeah, the par marks will start to fade as they get really old, but they're absolutely gorgeous fish, fun to catch, and they're not leader shy on the Bruno or the Jarbidge because they just don't get a lot of pressure. They actually get more pressure on the Jarbidge because everybody goes up there looking for bull trout for part of their native slam. So you can see our red band stream waters pretty much almost exclusively in Elko water up over here. You've got some Humboldt County stuff, but this is all streams up through here. You get up into the Jarbidge drainage here. You've got actually I take it back. This is the Jarbidge. This is the Bruno drainage, and the Jarbidge drainage over here. And it's just some absolutely great fishing. Most of these streams that you're seeing here, you can jump across, no more than 5-6 feet wide. And they're fun to fish. Fly fishing those streams, though, honestly, is more like cane pole fishing. But the Bruno and the Jarbidge, you've got the East Fork and the Middle Fork and the West Fork of the Jarbidge. The East Fork is the best fishing, but it's the hardest one to get into. The main stem of the Jarbidge is actually pretty good. So we've got 156 red band streams. So approximately 600 miles of occupied red band streams in stream miles in Nevada. Again, here's the Oahe below south. Here's Wild Horse Reservoir. This stream here, the East Fork of the Oahe, is really good. Love to fish it. Let me go back. I hit the button. The downside to this stream, there's not much red bands left in it because of the competition from the reservoir rainbows that come through here, and from here down to the confluence of Badger Creek. Really, you're catching reservoir fish in the stream. It's a lot of fun, and that has really turned on the last couple of years. This over here is the Bruno River drainage. Most of the pressure comes right down here where people are first crossing into it. But I like to fish up here between Miller Creek and Rattlesnake. I like this stretch here, and even the stretch up here can be pretty good. I found this stretch right down here is a little bit barren of fish. I don't know why. You cut across the road comes right down to here at the Mink Ranch, and what I will do if I can go with a buddy, or I'll take my ATV in the back of the truck, I'll park my vehicle here at the Mink Ranch. I'll drive down to here, roll in, park it, and then I'll fish this loop all the way back up through here. And the reason I do that, there's no road access along this. And so it doesn't get hit very hard. Now it can be, depending on flows, it can take you all day to fish it, or you can fish it in about 3 or 4 hours. Great fishing. The headwaters of the Bruno are up here, not many fish, pretty small if they are there. Red band streams, here's the Jarbidge. So you got the West Fork, the East Fork. Up here, the East Fork is where the better fishing is, but at the same time, it's also a little bit much harder access. You can see how much steeper this is through here, whereas up here not quite as steep. And so that's the Jarbidge. Bull trout, you can see they look quite a bit different. It's the southernmost population of bull trout in North America, and they are found in that Jarbidge drainage. And so you've got Jack Creek, Jenny Creek, right about here. Right in here is where you can park, and then you hike up into the state park here. You got to get up to about 7,000 feet of elevation before you really are getting into to bull trout waters. Though I've actually caught bull trout down here by the town of Jarbidge, so you can do it downtown, down lower elevations, but especially during the summer, getting up here at these higher elevations. If you get up that magic above 7,000, that's when you really start to get in. And you can see how much steeper east this is. Slide Creek, they had a big fire, but it's really steep to get down into here. We went in one time and we actually used ropes to, even though not necessarily we weren't climbing, wasn't climbing type stuff, but we just had ropes to make it easier to get down and back out. So like I said, there's more than 1,200 miles fishable streams this time of in the eastern region. You're looking at one of the beaver ponds up in Lamoille Creek. We also have our Nevada Native Slam, and the eastern region is the only region where you can get every single one of these. Yellowstones are all up in the very northeast corner, up there where Idaho, Utah, Nevada meet. The Bonnevils are all in that eastern front in the Ely area, Shell Creek Range, the Snakes. And then, of course, the red band and bull trout are up in the very northern part. And, of course, our mountain whitefish are also found in our red band and bull trout waters. So you can get 5 of the 6 right in Elko County. The only one you can't get in Elko County is the Bonnevils. But there's a population of Bonnevils in Goshu Creek just about 10 miles out of Elko County. So within an hour and a half drive of Elko, you can be getting those. Ruby Lake National Wildlife Refuge, another popular fishery. This is a pond behind the hatchery. It is closed because that pond is on hatchery property, and we have closed all of our hatcheries and all of our WMAs to the public. Right now, you currently can't fish there, but there's still lots of great fishing up there. In fact, that fish there is the state record rainbow. That was caught back in 2011, and it weighed 16 pounds, 8 ounces. This is a tiger trout I caught, I think, January of 2011. Same spot as that other fish. This was about a 5-pound tiger, closer to 4.5. But you know, I'm a fisherman. We're going to call it 5. But lots of tigers in there. You can see they're really pretty. For those who don't know, a tiger is a cross between a brook trout and a brown trout. So you got the refuge here. It's runs north and south. The easiest way to get to it from you guys would be to come up 93 and cut across south of Wells and then down. You can get to it from the south, but the road can be a little rough at times. And in the spring, when it's wet, it's really bad. So you've got a 40,000 acre refuge. You've got 6,000 acres up here of really shallow, and then you've got about 7,300 acres where what they call deep, i.e., more than 4 feet. The South Lake is big time bass fishing down through here. During the summer you can get to some really nice trout out in the southern body of the marsh. There's a main channel that runs this way that has big poles or markers with reflectors on the top to follow. If you're on a canoe or using a small boat, and you are not have not fished the marsh before, stay on the main channel or you will probably end up spending the night. You've got the North Dike units. Unfortunately, because the refuge manages this primarily for waterfowl, they've done some work in some of these. And so like these units here, East Marsh, North unit, Unit 14, don't really hold any fish anymore. Unit 10. The South unit and Unit 20 do hold bass. And then, of course, you have the collection ditch, which starts up here at the fingers, and it parallels the road all the way down to when you get down to Brown Dike. You fish it like a spring creek. It moves very slow, It's very crystal clear water. You are not allowed to wade it or go in there in a flow tube. So you need a long handled net because often the water is 2 feet below your feet when you're landing your fish, and a small net just doesn't work. And it's not uncommon to catch fish that are upwards of 5 to 10 pounds. So without a big net, you could be in a lot of trouble there. The locals fish it for big fish from about mid-December to mid-April. During the summer, the excuse me, the larger fish seem to move out into the South Marsh down here. Then they move back up in through the collection ditch as it comes along. You've got a lot of ponds down here that are really cool. So like I said, the state record came out of the collection ditch for the rainbow. The guy that caught the state record tiger trout says he caught it out of the collection ditch, but I looked at the picture. He's not on the ditch. He's at one of these ponds down south here. The secret to fishing those ponds is to not fish in the center where you see the fish holding on the spring heads. If they're on the spring heads, they're not feeding. All of those ponds have a little outflow that ranges in width from say 6 inches to maybe 2 feet. There's a current there. It brings all the insects to that point. So low light conditions, first thing in the morning, last thing at night, fish it with a really small, dark, dry fly, and keep low. Don't make any noise. Don't make any, walk softly so you don't have a lot of vibrations. Fish that outflow, and that's your best chance of catching those big fish there. There's a ruby marsh fish right there. And that's obviously not Nevada. I took those pictures on Alaskan cruise. But again, I want to thank you for following along, and I'll open up to any questions that you might have.
Joe, do you still have your fly shot?
I'm not allowed to talk about that while I'm doing NDOW stuff.
Okay. So the answer is yes. Is there a fly shop in Elko?
Yes, there is a fly shop in Elko.
Okay.
Any other questions, please? So I have fished most of these waters. Actually, all the ones I've talked about, I've fished. Other than some of the high mountain lakes I haven't been to. I got to be honest on that one. And now with my with a bad knee, I don't get up to the high mountain lakes hardly at all anymore. But if you ever have questions, please feel free to give me a. What's going on here? Please feel free to. No, and there are no words on when the state parks will open. One of the questions was any word on when state parks will open. Not till the governor says so. So I want to say, if you guys are new to fishing in Southern Nevada or haven't joined the local fly club, feel free to contact any of the local members of your Southern Nevada chapter. I think the number, I'll put it out there, 702-271-4458. That's Tom's phone number. And so I'm sure they'd love to have you. I found that our fly club up here, we get new members in, people take them under their wing. It's a great way to learn local waters. It's a great way to even learn how to fly fish. And so one of these days we got to get your club and our club together and do a fishing trip together. Maybe meet in the middle, like Cave Lake or Illapah. But Cave or Cummins would be really good. Those are two lakes I didn't mention that are closer to you guys. Cummins is right off of 93, just south of Ely. It's been putting out some real bomber trout, rainbows. They're not necessarily real long, but they are fat hogs, 18, 19 inches and 3.5 pounds. Cave Lake is right now has got a lot of issues. So even when you can travel, I probably wouldn't recommend fishing it too much. Though the campground is absolutely beautiful. If you're going to stay in the Ely area and want to camp, when the state parks open back up, that would be a place that I would like to camp. It's one of the few places there in Wild Horse that my wife will actually camp with me, because nice showers, very clean. Both of those rangers take very good care of the parks. Showers, clean, flush toilets, so she'll actually camp there with me. My wife's a city girl.
All right.
Questions?
Yeah, we're gonna unmute everyone. If you want to ask questions, we'll have you unmuted so you can. Mute yourself, please do so.
This is Toby. Am I on?
Yes.
Okay, 2 questions. First of all, thank you. This was beautiful. Your videos, your pictures were all great. There's like 3 or 4 of those fishes that I'd love to catch. How do I get a copy of your charts and your maps?
I'll tell you what. Most of those, you're talking about the ones that were in the PowerPoint?
Yes, and the chart that shows the locations and the anglers and the fishing and the height and the elevation, all that detail.
So we built off of stuff we have. And again, those are not the most current, but the elevation stuff doesn't change. Well, we just recorded this. Hey, Matt, are they going to be able to access this off your website, or how can people watch this?
Yeah, we'll get it uploaded to the website and whatnot. And then Toby, if you want, I can get it to you. I'll email you. I'll go through the recording and pause it and make a sheet for you if you want.
And you can always just grab a frame grab off of when you're watching it. I think I left them each up there long enough that should be easy to do.
Okay, thank you.
My pleasure. And you can always call me.
You do guides? Are you a guide? You take trips?
No, I work for the Department of Wildlife. I don't guide. But if you're coming up here, honestly, our waters are so easy to fish that if you know where to fish and what to use at that time of year, you don't need a guide. I got to be honest. I regularly get people onto the Bruno, the South Fork of the Humboldt, even the reservoirs, which are quite large, and get people into fish pretty easy without a guide. So you can save your money. If I happen to be fishing that day and you want to go fishing, I'll go fishing with you.
Right.
But I don't guide.
Okay. Thanks again.
And